I'd like to call the special City Council work session to order this Tuesday, December 4th. And so first, if you will please call the roll, Sherry.
Mayor Wolcott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Williams is absent. Councilmember Viendo.
Here.
Councilmember Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you will all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You want me to help you?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Thank you.
God bless America.
And Richard.
And so our first item on the agenda is...
This is a discussion and presentation regarding the City of Phoenix Community Development Program process and overview.
And we have a very special guest with us today. Councilman DeCiccio has agreed to join us to go over this particular proposal. This is a proposal that was adopted by the Phoenix City Council, I believe. Councilman DeCiccio, when was it? Was it this year? Yep, this year.
Yes, it passed on April 24. And thank you, Mayor, for having us out here.
So this is still a pretty fresh new policy for the City of Phoenix. The Mayor of Phoenix actually did share this policy with us at the MAG Regional Council as a best practice, and very much appreciate the City of Phoenix showing the leadership on this issue and wanting to share those best practices with your neighboring communities. And so I very much appreciate you joining us, and thanks to Councilman Hall also for working with you to bring this evening about. So welcome, And if
Thank
you would
you.
introduce your guest as well.
Derek Horn, he's our planning director from the city of Phoenix, who is
Turn your
very.
microphone on.
Mine is. Let's see. Is that better? There we go. I'll move closer. For those people like myself that may not be able to hear very well, it's probably a good thing you have a microphone. But usually when you're Italian, it doesn't, you don't have a problem communicating very well.
Councilman, I don't think
there's
the
usually
fact-
no
I don't
problem
think-
on that.
I don't think anybody has a hard time hearing you.
No, I know. Derek Horn, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Councilman DeCiccio, Mayor Walcott, members of the Surprise City Council. My name is Derek Horn. As Councilman DeCiccio said, I'm the Planning and Development Director for the City of Phoenix, and basically that mission's planning and zoning, building permits, and inspections.
Thank you for being here. Well, with that, let's just let you give your presentation, and we are very anxiously awaiting just that discussion that we might have afterwards as well. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you, Mayor. And I'll cover, what I'd like to do is just give kind of an overall view of what we're looking at and why we walked into and looked at creating this plan of making, creating a structure that businesses can operate in, but basically a 24-hour period. If you look at most businesses, or if you look at most governments around the country, a process that normally takes you 6 to 8 months, we wanted to bring down to a 24-hour or less policy. But we also wanted to do something more than that. We just didn't want to look at one part of it. We wanted to look at the whole part of opening up a business and how do you get started. And if you look at what's happening to the state to our west, they're seeing more and more regulatory types of burdens being put on them. You're starting to see higher taxes. You're seeing a lot of pressure down on the business community. So what ends up happening is when you start putting pressure down, just like anything else, it's Econ 101, that goes somewhere else. Capital moves. People move. People move to the areas where they have less pressure, just to give it kind of an overall view of why we looked at this. The other thing that we looked at and what created us to move in this direction is there were two other parts. One, it's about critical mass. If you put a 200-mile circle around the city of Phoenix or the valley, you really have the valley. That's about it. It doesn't have much more. So you have about 4 or 5 million people with a 200-mile circle around the center of Arizona. If you look at critical mass in San Diego or Los Angeles, you do a 200-mile circle around Los Angeles, you got a seventh of the world's economy right there within 200 miles. Do a 200-mile circle right around Dallas, Texas, or Austin, you've got a big chunk of the population in the country. Do a 200-mile circle around Philadelphia, you've got 80% of the world's or of the country's population based in a 200-mile circle. So we don't have critical mass here in Arizona. We just don't have it. But what we do have is innovation, the ability to do things a lot faster, smarter, and better than others. So if we're going to be attracting jobs, we've got to have an acknowledgement. One, we have a structural problem that we don't have the amount of population that other places have in order to do job creation. Then the other is what we looked at. Councilman Simplot and I chaired this committee. We also wanted to do, and we wanted to create a plan that allowed the small business owner, the guy and the woman that owns a yogurt shop, to be treated the same as a large corporation like an Intel. And if you look at what Chandler did, it's the same thing that Austin, Texas did. In order to attract the 300 and really now it's close to $500 billion operation, what they did is they went to these large companies because that's just what we do because they're large employers and you want them to come in and operate in your city. Everybody wants to do that. But what they did is when they went to them, they said, we will put a trailer out front and you're going to have 24/7 ability. You're going to be able to get your permits done in a 24/7 operation. You walk across there, get your permit, walk in. So what Councilman Simplot and I looked at, and we said, well, let's have that for everybody. Why can't we provide a plan that does that? And the plan that I'm about to present to you covers all that. So if you look at each of those points, the lack of critical mass, the ability, the importance for us to be able to work faster, smarter, and better and open up our businesses sooner, and the fact that we wanted to treat all businesses the same so you have an equal level of growth in your economy, not just the large players, but everyone gets treated the same. So that's how we did this. So let me walk you through the 4 stages that we did. Everyone talks about permitting, and that is huge, what we did, but it was bigger than that. So we looked at it in a deregulatory part of it too. Like, what could we do to deregulate and make it a lot easier for people to, and this is just what we did. That doesn't necessarily mean this is what you have to do, and other cities are looking at this model. But everyone's a little different. So we looked at it in the zoning part. Excuse me, I started losing my voice today.
Excuse me, Sal.
Go ahead.
Could we have the PowerPoint put on?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they're working on it right now. So we're having a bit of a technical glitch, so they're working on it right now.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll cover it. But thank you, Councilman Alton. If you look at the first few pages, that covers what we looked at originally right off the bat of, how do we deregulate and just make it a lot easier for people to start. So we looked at schools, copy, reproduction types of centers for copying. Do they really need a use permit or even a special permit? And we said no. So we eliminated that. Jewelers, retail sales, repairs, gemstone repair and cutting, out. All schools, out. Trade schools, not the educational schools, because they are done by right anyways. So what we wanted to do is look at those areas that we could cut on the zoning end, the use permit, special permit, that we found to be absolutely no problems in our city, but why are we even requiring them to do anything? So now by right that they're allowed to have it. So that's one of the parts, but the next steps are much larger than that. I mean, this alone is big, but what we did after that is we wanted to look at, okay, what are all the steps now necessary for a business to be opened? So you have your zoning, your regulatory part. Now comes the site plan. The site plan submission, as many of you know, has always been an issue. People have always complained. You turn in your plans into your city, and someone works on them, redlines them, goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Here's what we did with our site plan, and we're still working on one last segment in there, and I'll cover what that is. What we did is we said the plans that are already approved, it's right here, perfect. The plans that are already approved, do I do this? How do I do it? I'm not a computer guy. Okay. So the plans that are already approved, those plans, we made a determination of what is full conformance. So let's say you have a 100,000 square foot retail center, because this is something that everyone gets. It could be office, it could be anything. So, but let's use retail because that's what we are driven by with tax dollars. And let's say it's 100,000 square foot. And let's say you have a user that comes in there and says, I really need 10,000 square feet moved to another part of the center for me to go in here. In the past, at least in our city, they'd have to come in, it triggered a new site plan review, took weeks if not months to get through. What we said is anything that fits 90% of that plan, which is basically 10% conformance, anything within that 10%, which would be in 100,000 square feet, 10,000 feet, you can move, you walk in, and it's an over-the-counter approval. So we set a very definitive amount of square footage that we thought it still has to fit the setbacks, still has to fit all the stipulations, but 10%, it's automatic. What we also did, if you go through it on the site plan, over-the-counter is what we called it, and everybody calls it differently, but the over-the-counter program basically says that you walk in with your set of plans, it's over-the-counter, you walk out and you get approved. The next step that we did on site plan approval, so everyone thought it was about permits, right? It is, but it's a lot more than that we wanted to cover. So the other thing that we did with site plans is we had a process in place where you turned in your application to the city and you basically had 30 days in order, the city had 30 days to review it, send it back, go back and forth, and that process took months. By the time you go back and forth, the 30-day, instead of being the maximum, turned out to be the minimum, because that's just how it is. Whenever you set a number, that turns out the day that everyone expects it to be out. So whatever day you end up setting is what the day is. So what we wanted to do is we moved the city of Phoenix, and we're still working on part of this, but we're coming into a category of 1 day for those that get approved within a 1-day period, those within a 5-day, and then the large master plan, the very complex of the complex, we want to move about 85% of those under the 5-day or less approvals. But The ones that are more complex will be about 20 days, David?
20 days,
Or David,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all
I
right.
just gave him a promotion. I was thinking David Cavazos. But,
Making a lot of money by
yeah, well, I'm hearing about that. But he deserves it. You lost my train of thought. You're good at that. Oh, yeah, 20 days. So the maximum now will be 20 for the most complicated, but we want to get about 85% or more into that 5-day process, and we're evaluating what those projects would be. That's step number 2. Remember, the deregulatory part, zoning part. The second part came into the site plan. Now the third that everybody's been talking about. This is the permit. Getting your permit in a day. Now this is after you've been through those process. Now I want to start my operations. I got to start building my building. I've got to do those things to start my operations. We moved to a complete self-certification. What that means is that we had originally about 20, 30 architects on board at the City of Phoenix. We now have over 150 in place that they are certified. When they turn in their plans, it's deemed approved at that point. Well, not approved, but they get to move forward. We'll have
They
the
get a
audits.
permit.
They get a permit. So individuals now, we took a process that could take you, depending on your project, if it's a tenant improvement, those are the easiest of all. That could take you a minimum of 30 days, but more than likely closer to 45 and 60 days. When your plans get turned in, you walk out with a permit, you start your operations that same day. There are only 3 exclusions we had. 3. And I want to walk through civils, grading, and drainage too. That usually takes 3 to 4 months. We got that into 1 day too. But the 3 exclusions are this. Are any building that's above 75 feet, because there's a fire code dealing with that. General assembly, which are your schools and auditoriums and, with us, arenas. The third dealt with H4, which is your most hazardous of material. Those 3 still have to come through the city. Everything else is self-certified. Everything else is self-certified. Mayor?
Councilman, if I can ask a question about the certification process. How did you implement that certification process?
Okay. What we did is about almost 3 years ago, Mayor Walcott, when we set up the program, we set up a series of classes. Any designer who wanted to be self-certified had to attend these classes put on by staff. They were all day, they were 2 days, and we went through our City of Phoenix amendments and major parts of the building code, things that we look for and we think are important for review and to catch. And then after they went through those 2-day classes, and they were deemed self-certified. Now, they were self-certified for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, they need to recertify, which is take a refresher class. And we'll be coming up on that next year.
Pardon me, does that certify the entire firm, or does it certify just the one individual?
It certifies the one individual, and that individual is responsible for ensuring that not only the members of his firm, but also the designers, what we call the subconsultants, the other engineers that work for that prime consultant, do their work and do it right.
So that particular certified individual then is responsible, and all the subcontractors are accountable to him.
Yeah, all the subconsultants, not just as a fine point, Mayor, not necessarily the contractors, but the other engineers, the mechanical engineer, the structural engineer, the electrical engineer, the architect, who's usually the one who is certified, is responsible for their work and for ensuring its efficacy.
Okay, thank you.
And they're bonded and licensed and the rest of it. Now, at the beginning, at the beginning, you said that there's an automatic audit at the beginning for so many projects, and then you go to a random audit?
And that's the other part of it that we're still finishing up right now, which ones do. But the projects that are under 25,000 square feet, all random audits.
Okay.
And that's 10%. The ones above 25,000, we're moving to a plan where the first 3 are automatically audited.
Okay.
And then there's going to be a random audit after that. But here's the key part of that, because the audits can be no different than what you're doing today. What we wanted to do as a committee and as a city council, we said, look, the audit runs at the same track that they're allowed to do their construction. So you do nothing to stop people building and getting their projects in the ground and moving forward.
Okay.
That continues to move forward as the audit's going. So if the audit were to catch something, then it can stop them. But nothing stops them moving forward.
You're not looking at the electrical while they're trenching for plumbing.
Right. No, we're moving forward. Right.
Yeah.
So what we did too on that, we Councilman and Mayor Councilman, we also took that another step with the permitting. We also said, where is there another holdup that people have been having difficulty with? And that is with your civils, which is your grading and drainage. Those are for your new projects that generally can take 3 to 4 months. We went to a self-certification model for that as well. You walk in with your plans, you walk out, you can start your grading and drainage the same day. And what we did with that, because it was kind of a new territory, but we wanted to make sure we covered close to 80% or more of the projects that were going to be built in the city of Phoenix. So what we said was this. We said all multifamily housing, commercial and office, 20 acres or less, you can do your grading and drainage self-certified. Industrial, because we know that that's the market we want to attract. We picked 80 acres because that represents about 1.2 to 1.4 million square feet under roof, because that is the type of user we're trying to attract out of California. So we wanted to make sure that we had that in place. 80 acres for industrial, and then 160 acres for residential housing, single-family housing. So we broke that down into what those categories would be under self-certification. So that's what we did with the permitting end. Then the final step is, now you started construction, you want to get through. Now your permitting literally says, okay, how do I get done? How do I get my final permit to get out the door and open my business? So what we did with that.
Could you move it up
sorry.
so that the audience can see?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're just.
I've never been on this side of it.
There you
You
go.
want me to take care of that?
No. He says, "Do you want me to take care of it?" They're used to doing it. I've never been on this side of it. So I apologize to anybody who's watching that I'm
All right,
not that
you're
the greatest
forgiven.
on this.
Thank you very much.
But with the inspection part of it, we said, okay, now we want to make sure, and we've done a very good job of getting people, inspections done, but now we wanted to mandate a 24-hour turnaround. We said, if you call in today, you will get an inspector out tomorrow.
5 days a week?
5 days a week.
5 days a week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not off on Fridays.
No, we're not off on Fridays.
Thank you.
So but we also wanted to take that a step further. I mean, that was good on its own, but we said, look, we realized what happened back in the late 1990s and then 2005, 2006. If you look at your economic growth cycle, it went like this. So I'm Italian, I have to use my hands again. So you go like this. We could never keep up with the amount of growth that was occurring. So as the economy was moving here, we could only hire this fast. So there was an economic gap that was in the economy that we could not keep up with the level of growth and the demand that was out there, because we tried hiring more and more people, couldn't hire fast enough. It wasn't going to work. So the model we looked at, we said, okay, great. We're going to come up with a determination in March of what we believe to be our core number of inspectors are. Core number. And then every other growth, all the other growth is going to occur in the private sector. We're going to be using third-party inspections, which means they're still contracted out by the city. It's different than self-certification. It's called third-party. They're literally entities that work on behalf of the city. But we're going to grow those individuals on the outside to do those inspections. Now, a large amount of inspections that are complicated are already being done in the private sector. Most of us, I didn't even know it. And I thought I did, but I didn't. But a lot of these inspections are already being done. So you have a model where we need core individuals in place, but the growth is going to occur in the private sector. So with the self-certification, with the permitting, and the inspection part of it, what we did is we wanted to create a model that allows people to specialize in certain areas. For example, we can't hire enough people that are great in hospitals, but they're also great in industrial or retail. And the markets change a lot faster. So with self-certification, imagine this. Instead of us hiring people that are adept in every different field, Those fields now, with inspections and with permitting, those fields can now, you'll see engineering and architectural firms grow as the economy moves in that direction. So there will be firms that specialize in hospital care. There will be firms that specialize in multifamily. They end up growing a specialization that we can't do internally. So it's an acknowledgement that we can't grow that way. We just don't have the ability to hire that many people. So to cap it off, and is there more than that, or is that covered?
Sure.
Oh, that-
Now, Sal,
thanks,
can I ask,
Dick.
through the chair?
Sure.
Can I ask you a question, Sal? On
Sure.
the inspectors, that is one area where people have got a little bit nervous about your whole program. And I'm sure when you started to vet this at the beginning with your 125 citizen committee, which is just unbelievable to me, there was a lot of uneasiness about that, right?
There was.
Okay, so how do you, this third-party inspector, how's that relationship with the city? They're certified by the city, and they're
Private sector. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's several different types of inspections. I'm a structural engineer by inspection and by profession. In a previous life, I used to do what we call special inspections, which are those special, especially areas that Councilman DeCiccio was talking about. And then we have different types of inspections: mechanical, electrical, structural, accessibility. And we have contracts with different private firms to provide those inspections on an on-call basis. We actually do utilize those contracts when we have overflow work.
And what's the total amount? It's about $3 million?
Yeah, it's about $3 million that we can utilize.
So,
Councilman Alton.
thank you. So you certify them because of their strengths
Yes.
and their backgrounds?
Yes. And we also certify our own staff, too, I might add. They have to carry certifications in order to be employed.
But in Phoenix, you have a lot of contractors. In Surprise, we don't. So are these contractors that you're certifying and architects and all that, are they all throughout the region
Yes.
that have done previous work in the city of Phoenix?
Yeah. For example, the self-certified architects and engineers, they can be from any place, as long as they're registered in the state of Arizona.
like Orcut, for example.
Right.
Orcut, they will come out here if we go to this program, and they'll become certified by the city of Surprise. They're already certified by Phoenix, and they've done work out here in Surprise. So
And our list of certified designers is actually on our website. Anybody
Is
can
it
look
possible then, Skip, is that, excuse me.
Yeah.
Is it possible, Skip, then, that we could adapt their certified contractors and share in Surprise?
Yeah, we could. I mean, in other words, if I was a businessman and I wanted to expand, if I wanted to do work in Surprise, and I knew that Surprise had a self-certification program, and I was working for the city of Phoenix, I would come to Surprise and take your class and become certified by the city of Surprise.
And if you look at it, you could use that list, and the other cities are looking at doing that, like Chandler.
Right.
Chandler said, we're just going to use your list. Why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
But there are specific designs, like we don't have design review. Other cities have different criteria.
Right.
So yours might require a half-day class. You know, the codes are the codes are the codes.
Right.
You know, and everybody makes their own interpretations. But every city would probably end up having maybe a half-day class for these individuals that want to do business this way. But to say these are the specific differences that are different that, you know, that other places, then we would like you to take into consideration.
I think we have to acknowledge that there's a slightly different between a city the size of Phoenix and the city the size of Surprise. However, we all are in the Phoenix metropolitan market.
Right.
And so we do have that in that similarity. And so it is something that we can tailor make for each individual city according to, as you say, the code is the code is the code.
Right. The codes are the same. It's how we look at them, too. And there are going to be some specific differences that everybody's going to want to look at.
Sure.
We had that same discussion in other cities where they said, well, you know, when you really bring it down, the amount of differentiation is really not that much. Unless you have an incredible, you know, and I doubt it, that most people do, but it's that far off where you've adopted a code that you've got to get through, And then you've got all these other criteria, but all those other ones you would just, you would have to train them on that. The other issue that's going to come up with that you'll have is, the auditing part. Like, how do you really get your hands on that?
Right.
And we'd be more than willing to work with you from our staff level to figure out how to do that. We've essentially moved the entire city of Phoenix. We moved it. It's a leap of faith, but we moved it away from your plan review part to an auditing function. So staff moved pretty quickly, but we've been doing this for a little while too. We moved slow, but then we just took a huge jump on this and said we're going to fix it all, and we're going to fix it all at one time. So how you move into the auditing is another thing that every city will have to make a determination. Either you work with some of our auditors. There's a lot of ways to make that work. Mm-hmm. But we moved away from the permitting part to the auditing function.
And the back to the inspectors real quick, Sal. That's other than life safety, right? You don't do life safety inspections, do you?
I'm sorry.
Third party.
Third party? Oh, yes.
Third party life safety?
Yeah, we consider life safety such things as architectural, structural, electrical, mechanical, and you would have the ability and the provision to have outside inspectors do that. We do have fire inspectors who recently moved from the fire department, now are with us, and they do the fire code inspections.
And
Sprinklers.
Planning department.
Yeah, in our department.
He reports
they report
to
to me. Mm-hmm.
I see.
Through the chain of command, of course.
And because of our size, the next step that we're taking on this too, we're massive. We've got 15,000 employees, so we're pretty good size, and we carry a lot of mass. We have, different departments that always had to have buy-off on it. What the next step that the council is going to be doing is moving and consolidating all the power into one department. So the final say would be Derek's on water, sewer, streets. There will be one point where someone can say no or yes. And so there will be a line of responsibility to one individual.
Before we move on, Councilman Villanueva has a question.
I just have a quick question. With your new reforms, did you have to hire new staff or add to the staff?
No. We did not add to staff, and also nobody lost their job because of the reforms.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Councilman Biondo.
May I just follow up on that a bit? Obviously, ultimately, you get a significant return because of the growth, et cetera. But what sort of initial investment does the city have to make, whether it's staffing or in other ways, in order to implement the program in its at least reasonably full sense, the way you outlined it here?
Okay. Mayor Walcott, that is an excellent question. We had to make an initial investment when we first started the self-certification program 3 years ago. We had to have staff, look at what other cities had done, to look at the best model for us to create the tests, the classes, the administrative procedures that keep it up. And we did have the staff available at that time, and once we made the initial investment in that, then it becomes more of a daily process just to keep it up. We were able to do it with existing staff.
You may have noticed just with a name like mine, I talk with my hands too.
Yeah, well, that's I saw that going this way
married
already.
I married one, so I understand you.
There you go.
Councilman Alton.
How often does the recertifications happen? You got to keep these people up to date.
Yeah, 3 years.
Is it every 3 years?
Yeah, for self-cert, it's 3 years. Yes.
Okay. And so the person that wants to put a water heater in their garage, replace it, it's not a big deal.
Or electric water heater for residential, we would not require a permit for that.
Gas water heater.
Yes, we would require a permit for that.
And how long would that take?
Basically, it's an over-the-counter inspection, or it can be obtained online through our website 24 hours a day. And then it's just an inspection. Inspections occur within the next business day.
And what do you charge for that?
About $75, I believe. I don't carry that number in my head, so that's about the right figure. I just want to be clear about that.
How about tankless water heaters?
Again, that's I think those are electrical.
They're gas.
Oh, they're gas. Okay. Again, it's a water heater, so we would require a permit for that.
Okay. Thank you.
And then just to cap it off, the next step is, if you look at what we wanted to get done, again, to compete in this world economy, we live in a world market, so we got to compete in it. So we have to be faster, better, and smarter than everybody else because we don't have the critical mass. We don't have those things going for us. So we wanted to move this 24-hour, permitting to online. So now you could literally get your permits online. You'll be able to submit your plans online and push another button and get your permit at the same time. So we're looking at implementing that in June, July, fiscal year.
Thank you, Mayor. Sal, how did this affect tenant improvements for you guys?
It makes tenant improvements go a lot faster with the Express Pass one-day site plan review, which can cover most tenant improvements, and then the self-certification of a self-certified architect, designer, then again, a person can get their permit in one day. Where it may have taken, as Councilman DeCiccio said, maybe 30 days or more.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at tenant improvements, you have a variety of tenant improvements. You have the small, 900 to 1,000 square foot retail center, and then you have the ones that are thousands. The smaller one generally would not use a licensed architect. They just won't. But they'll find that it's going to be a lot less expensive for them to do that. So, but the larger ones do have architects on board that do that. So they'll be able to get theirs through a lot faster. The smaller individual will eventually be moving to this once it starts getting out there that they can get their permit in a day and they don't have to wait 30 days. And if you look at it, or if it's even 45 days, let's say it's a small coffee shop or a yogurt, by the time you'd make a decision to open up your business, and if we in the government delay you 30, 45 days, and there's a delay in there, that costs you thousands of dollars. By the time you open up and sell one cup of yogurt or sell one cup of coffee or sell one bagel, you could be in the hole $35,000 to $40,000. Right. And it's just so hard for you to recover. So for the smaller individuals in particular, you want to get them in and out. And they don't take money from their homes anymore. It's all about what they've saved. If they can save, that's where they get their money. Right. They're not getting credit. They're not getting anything for that. Mm-hmm. So in this economy that we live in today, you want to get those people in and out. So that's one of the things that we looked at as well. As we said, how does that work for them? And it'll be a lot less expensive for them to bring an architect on that's certified, turn in their plans, even if it costs them a few $100. They're able to get their operation going 30 to 45 days faster on the small projects.
Sorry, Councilman Alton.
Sal, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Your information has been very well accepted. You have an advantage in the marketplace. Phoenix does. And I appreciate you sharing that advantage with us. Because the West Valley has got to grow. And your investigations, your planning and so forth is insurmountable as the information that we need to have in City of Surprise. And I thank you. And I thank you, sir, for being here.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Council, and Councilman Alton. The Mayor Walcott and I were just talking about it earlier. We are really moving away from this parochialism. We really are. Now, we're going to compete with you because that's just what we do. But at the end of the day, our true competition isn't really here. It's coming from other parts of the world.
Sure it is.
That's who we're competing with. And as a city, a valley, a state, and a country, if we're not competing in this world economy and changing the way we do things, we are not going to be able to compete.
Right.
We can't.
Your opening comment spoke to it most directly about critical mass. We don't have it unless we work together. We will not have the critical mass that can compete with the largest economies in the world on our borders. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that we work together. And again, this actually came to the MAG Regional Council as a best practice that we should be considering. And I know that other cities, I think you mentioned that Peoria is looking at it tonight. Chandler has been very aggressively looking at this kind of thing. So again, we are looking at how we can look at these best practices and put them in place so that, because we really believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. So, Mayor Stanton has said, if it's not right for the city of Phoenix, it might be right for the city of Surprise, and so I'm going to make
Right.
a phone call. And the same thing has happened here. I know that we have seen businesses come to us, and it wasn't quite the right fit, and our community development director has made a phone call to the appropriate city on another side of the metropolitan area. That's just the way it works, because we are more regional. That's who we are right now, and I think those artificial barriers called city boundaries have to drop in order for us all to be successful.
Right.
Well, if you're a business owner from out of state, you don't see a street. You don't know where Surprise starts and
Exactly.
Peoria begins. You haven't got a clue. You know, and quite
you-
frankly,
and
in
you
my
really don't
district,
care.
I don't know where all the exact lines are either. So how do you expect someone from out of state to know that?
Plus, if we create jobs out here, then those people go down to the Diamondbacks game, they go to the Suns game, they, you know, all, Phoenix benefits from a gravity standpoint for development, all in that 200-mile circle. As I'm sure you figured that out. And I just appreciate all the work you've done, Sal, because I know it was frustrating, you and Councilman Simplot both, for having the guts and the tenacity. You got to be tenacious at this, right?
You have to make a determination that this is what we're going to do. And we wanted to look at the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I mean, it was hard. I mean, we all know how difficult it was. And, you know, staff does an incredible job, and they're great to work with. But sometimes we're set in a pattern that, you know,
Yep.
and
Change is hard no matter which side of
is.
the table you're sitting on, it's still hard.
oh, Mayor, I'll tell you, what got me all the time is we all, no matter where you go, we're always the best at this. Really? Are we really? You know, it's not always that way.
Sure.
Right.
So you've got to create models that allow you to compete in this new economy. You just have to. If you don't do that, you know, we're gonna struggle.
So would you continue to be a resource for us if our staff wanted to meet with your staff and not take too much of your time, because I know you're a busy guy too, but
No, we'll be very happy to meet with your staff and show you our facility, how we do things, you know, share information.
Good.
Yeah.
And at the end of the
Thank
day,
you.
it's your
Thank you.
decision.
Thank you, guys.
appreciate
Thank you, guys.
it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Skip.
very
Thank you for
much.
doing that.
for the
City Council.
dialogue.
Thanks, Mayor, Council.
Thank you very much. And next item.
Thank you, Mayor. Discussion regarding the Intergovernmental Relations Division 2013 third quarter grant update.
Thanks, Sal.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the City Council. This evening, I will be presenting. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the City Council. This evening, I'll be presenting with our new grants administrator, Jessica Bazina, and we will be talking about the third quarter results of grant activities. As usual, our major topics will include the internal process and where we're at with that, third quarter numbers and what the funding looks like, and then we'll wrap it up with just some of the other grant activities that the grant administrator has been doing. The third quarter covers July 1 through September 30th, and as usual, and as noted before, the grants all follow the annual goals of the City Council in their strategic plan, and right now City Council is in the process of updating those, and when those are completed, the grant research will target the new strategies and any updates that the City Council deems necessary. Additionally, we're around about $1.2 million below our targeted amount of grant funding for FY 2012. But this is preliminary numbers. We are waiting for the audit, and at that time, we'll reconcile all the numbers to make sure that we have them right.
Excuse me.
Councilman Alton?
Thank you. I'm trying to find it. Performance measures, actual, estimate, target, actual, 10,000 or 20,010. I don't see actual for 11, nor the third quarter through the third quarter of 12. I may be missing the 12, but I don't see the 10. Am I wrong?
The update for FY 2011, that probably is the correct number, but I am not positive. That was prior to me being here, and I can actually change that.
How about the 10, the actual of 3,939,000?
Yes, that is accurate.
But we're in 12, the end of 12.
The fiscal year is 2011-2012, and so those estimates are correct.
But
Those
how about the
estimates.
actuals?
It should say actual, and so I apologize. That is my
What should that column be that says actual?
the one that says FY 2011 estimates is actual, so it's mistitled.
3,313,969.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I will change that. That is actually an actual. So FY 2011 is our target, and we do not have those figures in just yet. Okay. Some of the key points, some of the things that we said that we would do is we would have a grant policy by now. We actually do have a draft in place, and the Finance and Budget Department has been reviewing that. We're holding off on that until the finance and budget policies are completed so that both actually say the same thing. We don't want to put one before the other. We want to make sure that they're consistent. And I'd like to let Jessica do the numbers, and I'll be here to reference any specific questions regarding those.
Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gaskins.
I can't hear you.
Madam Chair, members of council, as you can see by this slide, we did pursue 5 grants for the third quarter, totaling just about $2.1 million. We have 5 older grants still pending approval, but the good news is we have received a preliminary word that 3 of the older grants will be funded. And we did have 8 grants awarded for the third quarter, totaling just a little over $308,000. And you'll see by this slide, we have 37 grants citywide being managed at this time for a total of just about $10.8 million. We did receive word that we had 6 grants that we did pursue that were not funded. We have reached out to those funding agencies to determine why those grants weren't funded and what maybe we can do to improve our chances through the next cycle.
Councilman Alton.
Do you receive input or output from the grant people as to why we have not received it and what was wrong?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, we do have that dialogue ongoing, and we have reached out to these agencies to determine what was the concerning problem, why we weren't selected for those. And so getting that feedback, we'll apply that in future attempts and certainly move forward with their recommendations and their suggestions so that hopefully next time we are more successful.
Have you received them to date?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, no, unfortunately we have not yet received that feedback.
And how long ago was the grants denied?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, they're varying dates and they were all throughout the third quarter of this year.
And what is the normal length of time that you get a feedback if you ask for it? Evidently, if the city doesn't ask for it, you're never going to get it.
Right.
That's what we learned in Washington, D.C. And we've asked for every denial, right? Why we haven't been turned down?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, yes, we have.
And how long is the normal period of time?
Madam Chair, Councilman Alton, that can take. It's hard to define that time frame simply because connecting with the granting agency sometimes can take some time. In this case, I believe it's been a little bit longer simply because there was a transition.
Transition is what?
I'm sorry, there was a transition between Ms. Gaskin's role and me coming on board.
Thank
you. In the future, we'll hopefully be able to provide more specific information at these updates.
Madam Chair, members of the council, just to let you know just a little bit of background. The 6 grants that were denied are tribal grants, and we have reached out to the grantors to find out what we could have done to be more successful. I will let you know from my experience with grants, specifically tribal grants, there are times when we will not get a response, and that's actually not just with tribal grants. It could be with any grants. Federal grants, federal entities are required to call us back and give us feedback, but other grantors are not. If it's a nonprofit, they're not obligated to respond.
Councilman Alton.
I'm not sure of that. I think you have to request it from the city. I don't know if they're required to give you the feedback. If you don't ask for the feedback, you're never going to get it.
Absolutely, Councilman, and we have
Okay,
asked.
I think there was a misstatement there.
I think what
I'm sorry if
Councilman
I-
Alton, I think what Ms. Gaskins meant was if you ask for it, they're required to respond. I think that's what she meant.
Oh, I thought she said they were required to respond if you're going to get declined. And that's what I heard. I'm sorry. And I apologize if I heard incorrectly. So you're going to automatically receive information if you don't receive the grant? Or do you have to ask for it?
Madam Chair, members of the council, if you apply for a grant and you're denied, you definitely ask the grantor, can you please let me know how I can improve?
You have to ask.
Yes,
it.
the city must
Okay.
ask, and
Okay,
we do
because
that.
there was a time where the city was not asking.
No, that was made clear to me from the council from the first presentation that they wanted that update.
Thank you.
And at this time, we do not have a response.
But at the same time,
Councilman Hall?
didn't you say, Janine, that sometimes the tribes will not respond, even if
Madam-
you ask?
Madam Chairs and members of the council, not just tribes, but sometimes the grantors do not respond. The ones that are federal grants are required to respond no
Right.
matter what.
But the tribes not necessarily.
They're not required to, nor are nonprofits or other private entities that may want to fund. They don't even have to respond back with a denial.
But, I'm wondering, Janine, this is just an idea, and maybe I'm way off base, but maybe we need to, don't they have a public relations department with each one of these tribes?
Madam Chair, members of the council, yes, they do.
Maybe we need to develop a relationship with them, to ask their help.
Or their
I don't know.
lobbyists.
Yes, and we will continue to work on that. Thank you.
Gaskins.
And as Ms. Gaskins mentioned earlier, we do try to break out the grants to support, to reflect the support for each of the council's strategic goals to date. And again, we will be updating this to reflect the new priorities once those are formalized. But you'll see from this slide, about 35% of our grants are supporting sustainability, 29% supporting transportation, 6% supporting tourism, with 25% supporting economic development, and about 5% supporting education.
Councilman Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this because this breakout, is that where the money is? Is that what's driving the pie here?
Ms. Blazino.
Madam Chair, Councilman Hall, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And again, we are involved in some other activities outside of writing, seeking, applying for, and administrating the grants for the city, including keeping the grant website up to date to further enhance transparency, attending and representing the city on Maricopa Association of Governments committees and working groups. And then as far as the grant policy, again, we're working towards formalizing the grant policy process. We were able to host an event where we trained city staff this quarter. We are continuing to meet with our grant team and continuing our quarterly liaison meetings. We are working towards hosting an event for the public. And for example, just last night, I was able to attend the Arts and Cultural Advisory Commission to speak with them about potential opportunities that they may pursue. And I know Ms. Gaskins has been working with the Disability Advisory Commission as well. So we want to try to continue to reach out to our boards and commissions and the public to try to support their efforts as well. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Are there any questions, council members?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Councilman Villanueva.
Yes, maybe this applies to you, Ginny. Actions by the council, has that delayed grants where there's miscommunications, where we haven't decided on something? Have we run into that at all?
Madam Chair, members of the council, I'm sorry, would you please elaborate on the question? I'm not sure.
A decision that the council has to make as far as the grant goes. Sometimes our meetings aren't, will meet the deadline or something like that. Do we have any kind of a problem there?
Thank you for that clarification. Madam Chair, members of the council, that has not been the case as of late. We came to you last quarter and we changed a couple of things with regards to our submissions, and you allowed us to go forward with only coming to you if there was a cash match requirement. So that has not been the case within the last quarter.
Thank you.
Councilman Alton.
With all due respect, ladies, I'd like to hear from the directors and the chiefs as to the cooperation they're getting from the grants personnel, as to, and this would go through Chris as well, as to the productivity of this new thing that we adapted a year ago. I think, Janine, when we hired, or a half a year ago when we hired you, and that is a coordinated grants effort, more streamlined than we've ever had before, and more people, more eyes, more people looking at it and refining the application and how that has worked. I don't know if each department is still doing their own thing and not working through the grants writers or the grants overseers. And I know, Jeannie, you're not, well, you're in it, but you're not in it. Where are we with that? I don't have a good feeling yet. I'm not sure that we're attaining the maximum that we could possibly attain in our grant funding.
Mr. Hillman.
Yeah, I'll work with Mr. Celaya and with Jessica as well to be able to provide a report back to council on what the process is, and then with his and my assessments on how that's working.
Yeah.
Mr. Hillman and Councilman Alton, I think it's fair to ask for an analysis of how things are working. I think that we have not yet had a year in this process, so it's difficult to assess without a full year of the application process. But certainly to make certain that we're not dropping any opportunities to work together more cooperatively, I suggest that just having an update, just letting us know how that's working, coordinating with individual departments would be helpful to the entire council. Thank you.
To the chair.
Councilman Hall.
Just real quick. Remember, Janine, we talked about foundations and not to forget about foundations? And the reason I bring it up is because there are some, from what I understand, there are some tourism grants out there and community recreation service grants through foundations. And I think it's an area we, not to forget about, right?
Madam Chair, members of the council, Jessica Blazina is certainly going to look into that and continue our efforts. We have discovered several grants, and as previously noted, we do have an internal process that we actually have a grant team that looks at the merits of all the grants that we go after, and you should be seeing some stuff in the future.
Great, thanks.
Councilman Hall, too, I will also mention the fact that each and every time each one of us goes out to a conference or a meeting someplace, we almost always invariably come back with an idea of something that we heard someplace else. I can tell you, having just returned from a conference, that I can tell you I have a few ideas up my sleeve as well that I'm sharing with staff. Good. And look forward to going through the process to make sure that we're not missing out on opportunities that are available out there to other cities as well. Councilman Alton.
Thank you. Your narrative that you're going to bring back to us, I'd like to have a narrative from each one of the department directors as to whether or not this system is working for us on the grant system that we have universal, or are they still conducting their own grant requests without your involvement?
Madam
Can you
Chair.
do that? Thank you.
Councilman Biondo.
Thank you. Just quickly about the foundations aspect, and this may already exist, I'm not sure, but there are publications. They usually come in like 2 volumes. Probably cost around $200-300 to get the 2 volumes, but they itemize every single foundation out there and categorize it by area of interest or area of possible funding, whether it's arts or education or whatever it happens to be. And if we don't have those resources, I think I would certainly recommend spending the couple $100 to buy those foundation volumes.
Thank you, Councilman.
You know, the other, just to the chair. Also, because right now, what I'm thinking about right now is the original town site. And it just seems to me that that area could have a lot of qualifications for grants. And some of it's not going to come from the federal government. Some of it's going to be a foundation or whatever. But, you know, we've been working on a Boys and Girls Club there for the last couple of years, and they'd love to be in the original town site. It's just the cash contribution, and we're not prepared to do it as a city, but maybe there's a grant opportunity to make that Boys and Girls Club a reality. And so that's where I'm thinking specifically. You know what I'm saying? So anyway.
Councilman Alton.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with Councilman Hall. This is a rehab area, and there's so many plans for Grand Avenue, and they're just being developed at the present time. And I got to think there is some federal money to do some rehab in that whole town site. All we have to do is go after it. And I would like to have that as a #1 priority as well, and which might include a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA or whatever. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Villanueva, did you have a comment? Well, you know, first of all, I think that it's good. This is the workshop process that we get to give out some ideas. And as you all know, that we have embarked on a rather large project, which is the revitalization of Grand Avenue. And the Grand Avenue corridor includes the original town site. So we know that this is a rather large undertaking. It is a 23-mile-long corridor. And we want to do this in a collaborative effort to try to revitalize that corridor and make it the best that it can be so that it really truly lives up to its name of Grand. And so it is a process that we have embarked on as a region. All of the partners that we have partnered and we have agreed to partner with along the corridor, we are continually developing those partnerships and working together. I would point out that I believe it was a year and a half ago, we actually submitted a joint grant on that partnership. We did not receive that grant. But that doesn't mean that we aren't going to continue to try to reach out and find every opportunity that we can to capitalize on the opportunities that exist. And I think we're still in the process of building this team. We now have our new grants manager in place. We have the experience of Ms. Gaskins as well. I've seen both of them reaching out and working with other grants managers in other cities. And again, this is going to be a partnership because we can't, just like Councilman DeSicchio is here tonight, it's not because he only cares about Phoenix. He cares about what's going on beyond the borders. And the Grand Avenue corridor is certainly a priority for the entire council. That includes the original town site. There are a multitude of grants, even in the original town site, that no other part of the city would even be eligible for. So I'm confident that they are on it, as they say.
I just really when I look at Grand Avenue, because I don't really take 101 and 10 for the most part when I go downtown. I go down Grand Avenue. It's a great way to go downtown, and you cut a lot. It's quicker, and so I've been looking at it a lot lately. My daughter lives down there, and my grandson lives down there. So, but in looking at it, Surprise has a unique window on Grand Avenue. It's more unique than the rest of the cities along there when you really look at it. Okay, because there's a lot of residential right near Grand, which is different than a lot of other areas. Anyway, so I'm just I think that we could almost take the lead in this in terms of how we could refurbish Grand Avenue in Surprise and set the example for the whole partnership along Grand Avenue. Because I agree, it is a partnership, and but I think we got the smarts and the capability to really set an example on Grand Avenue. I really do. What do you think, Roy?
Well, one of the things that I would like to see is that, and we're talking about it tonight, I want to continue hearing maybe 2 months from now where we're at, what we'd applied for, and what's going to happen on Grand Avenue instead of 6 months from now. You know, it's something that's forgotten.
Good input. Any other comments, questions? Very well. Thank you very much for your input. I appreciate your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council.
Next item.
Presentation and discussion regarding authorizing the fire chief to accept a grant award from the state of Arizona Department of Homeland Security Urban Area Security Initiative in the amount of $33,280.
Madam Chair, Council, Mr. Hillman. That last slide was a good lead into my presentation talking about successful grants. This afternoon, I'm here to discuss with you about a successful Homeland Security grant of $33,280. The grant is 100% funded with zero match to the city and will be funded from the unforeseen grants and then reimbursed to that grant. The purpose of the grant is to enable our hazmat technicians to have internet connectivity via a satellite connection so that they can research chemical databases from throughout the world to mitigate chemical emergencies. This item, along with Resolution 2012-52, will be coming to you next week for your consideration and your approval, acceptance, and budget authority for this grant. Concludes my presentation, and I can
Councilman
take questions.
Hall.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Chief, as it relates to this, are you on notice from BNSF of everything that's going through Surprise on the tracks?
No.
Okay. Oh, wow.
No. They do not call us.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, Councilman.
Go ahead.
They do not call me every day to tell me that they have certain shipments that come through here. And that's because of the regulation. They are complying with state and federal regulations. There are certain packaging requirements that are already there, that are placards that we use to recognize the presence of hazardous materials.
Okay.
That we teach our people that any type of a transportation, whether it's over the road or on the rail, you suspect hazardous materials until proven otherwise. And we are always searching for those subtle signs and clues of what is coming through. Now, there are certain federal regulations that require them to tell me if they had a shipment of Class A explosives, for example, they have to tell me.
Okay.
If they have some nuclear gamma rods that are going to the plant, then they have to tell me. Other than that, they keep within federal regulations, and they tell us as needed. But we do not get a daily report, and it's not required.
But let's say I'm BNSF and I send you a notice about a very hazardous material.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then this satellite database, you'd plug into that and say, if there was a problem, this is how we'd mitigate that.
Right. We have several different databases now. This is a mobile, so it doesn't matter where we're at, that if I have XYZ chemical that has leaked and spilled, that I can reference it to find out what are my evacuation zones, especially downwind, how to treat it, what type of chemical clothing my people have to get into so that they're not contaminated. That's what it gives us, greater enhancements, and that's exactly what this grant does.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Alton?
Thank you.
Councilman Biondo?
Just quickly, is this it's a one-time grant? Is it renewable at all?
No, this is a one-time grant.
Okay.
Just a question, how much advance notice do you get typically on those types of particularly volatile items?
You know, it's actually pretty rare.
That you get advance notice?
Yeah, it's actually pretty rare because they don't ship it in those types of quantities. Usually they are transported. What you're thinking of, if Class A explosives are transported in a different way, because of the amount of volume that we would not want rail yards of Class A explosives coming through here because of the potential. So they are downsized, smaller, and usually go over the road.
And so,
not always.
And I'm certainly familiar that you don't get the manifest on every rail car, every train, but we certainly have become more sophisticated over the years, especially now with the internet and technology like this. So
Correct.
This will help us become a little bit more aware of what's going on and what's traveling through our town and what types of risks might be there in case of some sort of an unfortunate incident.
That's correct.
Okay. Councilman Alton.
Thank you. Chief,
Yes.
we have a rail line that goes to Luke Air Force Base that delivers gas, oil, diesel, or whatever air fuel there is. How about bombs?
The general hasn't called me lately to tell me when his shipment comes.
No.
They
I understand.
do
I
not
understand that.
forewarn.
But what I'm asking is if I can't think of any other modem that it would come in under than rail. Maybe trucks. I don't think airplane. Okay.
I would suggest that they have a bombing range in distance that they could probably load up their cargo there. But
I understand that. But we have a Luke Air Force Base that loads up with bombs to go over to Yuma to the range.
Gila Bend?
Right?
Yeah.
Gila Bend.
Yeah.
Gila Bend. But where do they load up? I think it's in Luke. So how does that merchandise get to Luke?
You got to realize that they are a self-contained entity by themselves. When you're talking,
They make their own bombs.
When you're talking about those types of weapons that they use, they typically will transport that themselves. That's not going to come through a heavy populated area without notifying people here. You are safe. I can tell you without a doubt, you are safe. Now, you're not going to have that type of material when you see all the LPG tanks that are lined up along Grand Avenue.
Right.
That is absolutely legal because we have a large underground storage
Right.
of liquefied petroleum gas here.
But I lived in the East Bay in California, and Martinez had a site that was a bomb gathering site, and it came by via rail and or ship, but it was transferred by rail. And I love Luke, and I love the F-35, and I want to be there with them 100%. But I'm just wondering, what is the transportation mechanism that they use for?
Well, you have to also understand that there's also a southern rail line here in Phoenix as well.
Yeah,
that can
below-
also come up in
below.
a different way.
But I don't think they have transportation into Luke. So how are they
Councilman Alton,
transporting?
perhaps we can facilitate your question. Maybe we can ask, we can make an inquiry to Luke as to how they are transporting it, so that we are
Sure.
not making,
Go for it.
we're not making assumptions.
We can get with Rusty and find that
Sure.
information
I would
out.
bet
I'll
we
have
could.
Michael
Yeah, I'd
Sly
love
get
to
with
hear
Rusty
that.
to get that information for you.
Chief.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
You're on tonight.
Questions? Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate it.
Question.
Next item.
Item number 4, discussion on contract COS 12-037 between the City of Surprise and Felix Construction Design and Construction of the Spa 2 overhead
doing, Bob?
crane.
Hey, Bob.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. I've asked Michael Belay, who's a project manager in the CIP division, who's been familiar with this project. He's worked with the operations staff in terms of helping with the design and build of this process. And I've asked him to present a short presentation for council to get an idea of what the project consists of and give the pertinent details. And we both will be available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of council. As Bob mentioned, up for discussion and presentation tonight is a design-build contract for the overhead crane at the Spa 2 Water Reclamation Facility. It is an FY13 CIP project. It is our intent to bring this contract forward next Tuesday for your guys' formal hearing and approval. Before we get into some of the details of the actual contract and the crane itself, I'd like to provide some brief background information on the Spa 2 treatment facility. The Spa 2 Water Reclamation Facility is located at 155th Avenue and Pinnacle Peak Road. This treatment plant was commissioned in the fall of 2009. The technology used in this treatment facility relies on a series of membrane filters. And as you can see in this aerial image here, under these black covers right here where these membrane filters lie. There are 4 membrane filters in each treatment train, 16 in total. Currently, the city utilizes a rental crane service for the monthly maintenance of these membrane filters. They have to be cleaned and tensioned to ensure adequate wastewater filtration. Due to the time and cost associated with the rental crane, the operations staff is very limited in the number of membranes they can pull and service at a certain amount of time. So with this project, we'd like to facilitate a permanent crane so we can eliminate this rental crane service, thus having the ability to more freely service these membranes. This next slide depicts a rendering of what we'd like to accomplish with the design build of an overhead crane. It's a 5-ton overhead fixed crane. As I mentioned, it will allow for the operators to remove the membranes at their own discretion. The construction will also include a membrane laydown area. We're right here where they can service the membranes in an environmentally conscious way. We elected to go with the design build project delivery method in an effort to save project time and save project cost. We had 5 design build teams submit proposals or responses to our request for qualifications. Felix Construction Company, in partnership with Greeley Hansen, was selected based on their qualifications. They were the most qualified submittal. Felix Construction Company is a local company. Their headquarters is here in Surprise, so that's good news. This project was budgeted in the FY13 Sewer Operations Fund, and the return on investment when comparing the rental cost to the capital outlay is 3 years. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Chair,
3 years return.
what's the warranty on the crane?
The warranty, typically with CIP projects, we'll have a 2-year contractor warranty, and then the bridge, whomever the bridge manufacturer is, will also have a warranty on top of that.
Okay.
At this time, I'm not sure what that is.
Okay. So are we when you're doing the ROI for the 3 years, are you calculating in any maintenance cost?
Yeah.
Would be borne by us. You are, not just the acquisition cost of the crane, but maintenance of that. Is that calced into the 3-year?
Not at this time. The ROI did not include that.
Okay, so it's a little longer then.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Councilman Biondo.
Thank you, Mayor. You said you had 5 bids initially going in?
Yes, we had 5 proposals submitted.
Were they fairly comparable?
Yeah, the reason why we selected Greeley Hansen and Felix was their extensive background in this type of crane application.
Councilman Hall? Oh, excuse me, Councilman Alton.
Thank you. You can call me anything. Just call me late for dinner. Was this the most inexpensive?
This was a qualifications-based selection. So following the selection of Felix and Greeley Hansen, we negotiated the scope and fee, and we feel that the negotiated $298,500 is a very competitive price. And the beauty of a design build process is it's going to be open book and completely transparent, so we'll know all of the inbound and outbound
So
money.
the ROI was only 2 years,
3 years.
3 years, but the warranty was only a year, and then another year on the crane mechanism.
So it's a 2-year warranty that we will place on Felix Construction. So if anything happens to the bridge crane within that 2 years, that's on them. What we'll be looking for is the actual manufacturer of the crane and the motors. Those will have a warranty outlasting Felix Construction's warranty.
Okay, but we don't know that yet.
That's correct.
Well, maybe we need to bring this back when we know it.
The equipment warranties are typically anywhere from 2 years to 5 years, and this is what we anticipate with this equipment component of this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If it's a ROI on 3 years, 3 years.
3 years. Return on investment is 3 years.
And the warranty only lasts 2 that we kind of think of, and that's the mechanism itself, and also the crane is 1 year. I think we need to know what we're getting into before we sign off on it.
Well, the return on investment, the way it was calculated, was that quite simply we're spending $90,000 a year on a rental. The sooner that we bring this online, regardless of the maintenance contract, there will be a savings after year 3 of that $90,000. So the longer, I guess the urgency that we see is a cost-saving initiative that we're trying to reduce the rental cost for the future. Whether or not the warranty is 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years is not going to have a bearing on the return on investment as calculated.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
To the chair.
Councilman Hall?
What's the time of use of the equipment?
A useful life for a bridge crane, I was just talking to the contractor about this, is about 15 to 20 years. And in this rendering, you can see it's a lot of I-beam steel, so the only thing that really wears out is the electrical motor components. And
Right. But no, that isn't what I mean, though. That's good to know. But what is the time of use during the year? How many days are you going to be using this?
currently, right now, they have the rental crane on site for about 5 working days. And having the fixed bridge crane here, they'll use it quite more frequently because to date, with the rental crane service, they're only pulling 4 of the 16 membranes due to the time-sensitive nature of the rental crane. So having the ability to pull all 16 filter membranes, they'll be using this quite frequently.
I think the estimated time what we built into our budget and we project in the future for our rental purposes, it'd be at least 4 times a year that we would have to reserve the crane. And when we bring the crane out there, it'll be in more than likely multiple days. And that would do what we would require, the manufacturer would require for preventative maintenance. We anticipate as the filters get older, there's going to be more frequent maintenance. So that number will increase over time. So it's quarterly now, but it very likely could be, every month as we go longer into life.
Is there any opportunity for rental income?
Income on this?
I don't think so. It's over our
Councilman,
it's
please.
over our sewer. Well, they're gonna rent it.
Put wheels on it, huh?
Yeah.
Councilman Alton had a sales proposal.
No, I didn't. Are you calling on me?
Alton.
Thank you. Our membranes that we currently have in place, and this is what this crane is for, is to pull the membranes out. I got to think of it as a pool filter.
Sure.
And hosing it down, right, and then putting it back in, correct?
That's correct.
Good analogy?
Mm-hmm.
How long is the life of our membranes?
I don't know that at this time. And next week, if we bring this forward, I can have that answer for you.
And if we clean it more often, because we have the mechanism in place, right, does it extend the life of the membranes?
I'll have to talk to our operations staff on that.
Okay.
To some degree it does.
Or are we just washing the heck out of it?
No, the functionality of the membrane, what they do is, you don't, like a conventional swimming pool filter, what you do, this is more equating to a backwash. You reverse the flow. So when you bring it out, you reverse the flow, let it drain. After it's out, you let it drain. And that's the reason it's for inspection purposes and for draining all the water outside.
On top of the...
No, it's inside, you know, as it's shown, it's in the ground, and then it's elevated up to drain the membranes, and then from that point, it's inspected. So you want a clear drain plus inspection, and that's the purpose of this.
I see. And does the citizens notice this?
Does who?
The citizens
Are you
are
asking if
surprised.
there's an odor?
Is there odor?
Is there an odor
No.
and stuff?
No.
Okay.
There's not in this process. It's a very clean process. And plus, there are no neighbors out there at this point in time.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, council members? No other questions? Mr. Hillman, did you have a question?
I should have.
No, the whole pool filters thing, I would never go swimming, you know, anything like that. That ruined the image for me right there.
Thank you. All right, thanks very much, Bob.
No, I thought they pulled them out and squared them off.
Well, basically, that's what they do.
Madam
Oh,
Chair?
pardon me.
Yes.
We did have one member of the public who wished to speak on this item, Mr. Vukanovich.
Times are changing, so you have to keep up with what we're doing. In 2009, I had the assurance from the city manager at that time that we would not do any of this thing that's in conflict with the state statutes in letting out bids. So that's why I'm concerned about this here. You're putting the, you know, generally you hire an architect and they design what you want. Then you take that out for bids. I'm not even sure that you had a design for this to give to a contractor to bid on. Because this is all strange to me how you got this formula put in here. Okay, Honorable Mayor and Council members, I'd like to place my opposition to this proposal in the record. In this packet, how do we determine who the low bidder was? See, we have to have all the information. We don't know what the bids were. You weren't given a bid. According to one council member, he doesn't have the bids. So what were the bids from these other whoever they are? And what are we and was the low bidder was, and what are we implying saying the project manager negotiated the scope and fees? What did that mean? Must mean something. Did he set the prices? Did he set how much they're going to get paid? Because it says, and what are we implying saying the project manager negotiated the scope and fees? What concerns me in the past, you have been told and approved the hiring of consultants on qualifications only. That cost will not be a factor in the selection. So I think we always have to maintain what is the cost. Keep the cost down. Take the low bidder. Why are we going to give, unless there's a particular thing that we're going to give a higher bid to somebody else? Now I don't know if I understood earlier when you had this gentleman here. I thought I understood that a qualified contractor licensed in the state of Arizona, do they have to be certified by the city to do city work? I don't know if I heard that correctly or not, because the qualifications of a contractor is being licensed by the state. Is combining the design and construction bid together allowed? Do we have a separation of design and construction cost? I don't know if we have a cost for the design of this project, and do we also have a construction cost for this project? I believe that doing an RFQ on the construction of this project and not using the lowest construction bid would violate Arizona Statute 34-201, notice of intention to receive bids and enter contract. Now with the consultants, you don't have to go for bids on the consultants. But according to Arizona statutes, when you give a bid out, you have to a contractor, you have to have bids out. And then what committee approved and who gave a legal opinion on this process? In your paperwork there, it says the committee approved. I can't find, I don't know of any committee there. I looked on the city's website, what committee would approve that? I don't have any idea. So I'm asking what committee approved and who gave a legal opinion on this process, because I believe it violates the state statutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Mr. Bailey, would you mind responding to
Yes,
that?
my office would have been the one that would be responsible, and I accept 100% responsibility because the way we're moving in the appropriate direction is that state statute allows for various methodologies. We're in compliance with state statute.
Council members, no further questions on this one. We are going to move on to item 5.
Item number 5, discussion regarding council policies and procedures.
Councilmember Woodard.
We're back one more time with the Policies and Procedures Manual for City Council. There's been no changes. Am I correct, Mr. Bailey?
Since the last time that we met and we solicited feedback from the council, we have not received any feedback that would require changes.
However, one of the things that, and I'm very grateful that we have an author on the subcommittee, because Mr. Biondo took this large document, which basically is covering everything that's in various places throughout the city code and putting it all in one area. And he took a portion of it that deals specifically with council and council functions and some of the what would you call it, Jim? Less legalese?
Councilman Biondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we talked about in, let me go back just a step, Councilmember Woodard wouldn't mind. It was my understanding when we were with the subcommittee that Councilmember Woodard's goal was to gather all the documents which relate to council in one place, and Councilmember Alton also was on the subcommittee. Whether they're procedures, whether they're policies, whether they're ordinances, whether they're provisions in the municipal code, and those exist in all those various forms and in all those various places. So that end goal was to gather all those so that in essence, and there's a little history of this that goes before my time, I understand, but so that ultimately you have one file, that you have everything in one file. And I think to have that single source reference book, which basically this is, a single source reference book with all those in full text, not abbreviated, not just essential elements, but in full text, I think was that ultimate goal. And I'd really like to commend Councilmember Woodard for that goal and for achieving that goal, I think, in this publication. What we talked about was then somewhere down the way, whether it's in January or February, then developing something akin to a city council handbook, one portion of which, and I think this was the thing to which Councilmember Woodard was making reference, one portion of which would be a description of those council policies, procedures, etc., but only the essential elements, so that it becomes a more user-friendly, if I can use that phrase, a summary of just the essential elements of. So probably after the first of the year, we'll work on that a bit and then bring drafts to you for that.
Thank you.
So what we have is to deal with tonight and to take action on next week is this process, this manual that we've been working on now for, I believe, a little over a year.
Policy manual?
And
I think we got it. Several.
You've had it, I think, twice at least to look at and comment. So we've taken everything. Well, there were no comments.
Correct.
So what we've done, we've got all of that information in one place, one source book, and then in the future we will have a summary of this.
Good.
So
Can we get a copy of this, Mike?
We're going to update that, Jim.
Councilman Woodard, what you have before us is basically a compilation of all adopted policies, procedures, state laws, everything that is relating to the City of Surprise City Council. And so this is all in one place, and it's a very helpful document to have everything in one place. How better for us to be able to look at each of these pieces critically, to have them all in one place so that you can do a comparative analysis. Typically, in my past experience, when you have a large document, like a state statute, for example, you will find some conflicting language in one part of the statute to another, and typically there's a corrections process at the end of each legislative session. That would be the next stage, would be the corrections process as to analyzing this document for corrections and inconsistencies. And so I really, really appreciate the work that you and your subcommittee have done in assembling all of these documents and bringing them together for further
I have
analysis.
I've not had an opportunity to speak recently with Councilman Alton, but I have with Councilman Biondo, and this subcommittee I think would like to continue and do that. In other words, we've got this, and we're familiar with what's in here because we've been working on it for well over a year. And so if that's the desire of the council to go forward and make that comparison and make that study, I would suggest that you direct us to, and we can do that.
May I just add?
Councilman Biondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what you were saying, because now as one steps back and looks at everything in here, then I think that kind of in-depth analysis of each piece may be helpful. I suspect I pretty much know, as we all do, there are some that probably haven't been updated for a period of time. On the other hand, there are others, such as the arts policy in here, that we just adopted. So that kind of, I like the word comparative that you used earlier, Mayor. I think that's probably what needs to be done at this point. Take each piece, do an in-depth analysis of each piece, what's been recently approved, what are the voids, what are the gaps that may exist, what are the updatings that may need to be done. But obviously that's a pretty detailed task, but maybe an important one to consider in the future.
Through the chair.
Councilman Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mike, what are we taking action on next week, next Tuesday?
If I may, Mayor and Council, you'll be passing a resolution that you'll be repealing some of the past, and it will identify all of those. And we've talked about this. You'll be, for example, repealing the City Council cell phone policy. As we discussed previously, you won't be having your own cell phone policy. You'll be following the city's policy. Same thing with communications policies, that sort of thing, so that there's some consistency where there's not that conflict between your policy and then actually city policy. Another one that comes to mind is the travel policy. Okay. So you'll be repealing those and then recognizing those others as policies that you will.
So you'll have it summarized for us.
You will have a resolution. You will pass the resolution, which in effect approves what you have before you in the form that it is before you. Meaning it will read repealing cell phone policy, and so what will be reflected as the cell phone policy will actually be the city's cell phone policy, not yours.
Okay. And then the next generation of review is what you're talking about, huh? The comparative analysis.
Correct. That would be, that's something that I think is extremely important, that on a regular basis that we look at how we're doing, because quite frankly, some of these policies were actually created a generation ago, and they may no longer be relevant. And so I am not, as long as what we're doing is trying to be consistent with manager policy, those kinds of things, and so the action that we take next week is actually related to the future and not trying to reaffirm these, what's already in law. That would be, I think, to our advantage.
Correct, and it's moving forward. Also, it's putting it in a form, and it's more towards your point, it's putting it in a form as well where you can go through and parse out sections that aren't relevant any longer, and then you just remove that policy as opposed to having to redo this whole manual of policies and procedures, which becomes more complex. It's to simplify and break it down.
So tonight, we're getting the report of the subcommittee. This document essentially serves as the report of the subcommittee, and what we will be adopting at the council meeting next week is simply that resolution which memorializes how we are trying to bring these pieces together to make sure that council policy and management policy are one and the same.
Correct.
You can get one.
Is everyone comfortable with that? Yeah. Very good. Thank you again to you, Councilman Woodard, and to your subcommittee, Councilman Biondo and Alton. I appreciate the time that you've spent on bringing this together. And by the way, Mr. Bailey, I appreciate your help too. That I'm sure that they really appreciated your assistance. And
we also have to thank our city clerk because
absolutely
a marvelous job for us along.
Well, I know one thing is for certain, that if we move forward with an extensive comparative analysis of this document, there will be no one more valuable to that process than our city clerk, who understands where each one of these things came from to begin with. And so thank you, Sherry, as well, for all the work that you've done and to provide that subcommittee. So, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your work. So, item 6.
Discussion and update on the fiscal year 2014 budget process.
Mr. Hillman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is really just a broad summary. There's really no new information here. Most of this is information that the council is already very familiar with. But what I thought I'd do is maybe provide, especially some of this information, especially in tandem with some dates, some very important dates that I see coming up, and how the dates of some of the financial information that's going to be provided, and as we learn, on some of these audits, how they come through, how that's going to play with the budget process. And talk a little bit about what right now my approach is going to be as a city manager and approaching this next fiscal year, and if there's any discussion or changes that the council would like. This is, again, just sort of a broad overview. I don't think, again, anything is going to be new to the council, but it would be helpful to have this discussion, I think, also for the public, so they know and understand where we're sitting at as a city right now, for our employees, et cetera. There's been some questions because we've had some good news recently, and it's good to have good news. Our revenues are coming in, above budget, quite honestly. The interest discussion, the interest decision that the council made a couple weeks back is good news, and how it affects the reserve. So what I thought I'd do is talk about some of those components relative to some of these dates, and how I see all of this sort of fitting in, with the budget process. To start out with, in our current fiscal year, for fiscal year 13, as we discussed when we were creating it a couple months ago, in essence what we have done is we've created really a 2-year budget. And that was based upon the council's policy direction to have a fully funded reserve within our general fund within 24 months. And so we set up a process. We cut our expenses. As you know, we went through the budget cuts that we did, and made those changes. And our goal is to try and hold those expenses as flat as we can, letting our revenues increase, which fortunately they're not only meeting budget, but even fortunately exceeding budget, and letting those revenues then accumulate and fall into our reserve. So far, so good. Again, our whole goal, so any revenue surpluses that we have, any expense savings that we have per the council policy, are automatically going to fall into that reserve balance to try and achieve that reserve policy goal sooner, even if possible, than 2 years. And right now, there's a possibility that we might be able to beat that 2 years. And so we're cautiously optimistic. We're going to wait to see how some of our audit reports come out. So right now, so far, so good, and we'll see how it plays out. But there is, I believe at this point, a strong possibility that we'll be able to meet that reserve requirement sooner than the 2-year process. But we'll have to wait to see how all this plays out. Yes, Ms. Ross.
Chris, could you have somebody put it on the screen for the viewers?
Oh, the memo that we have here, the memorandum.
For the people.
There wasn't a PowerPoint. There wasn't a PowerPoint. Yeah, there's no PowerPoint. This was just a discussion I was going to have, and what council had in the pack was just a memo I provided. That was it. Yeah, there really is no PowerPoint. This was just relative to just a discussion. I think there's some important dates, and that I want to just sort of quickly run through that I hope help provide some perspective, and how some of this information is going to get played out. At the end of December, what we're anticipating is all the post-audit work will be completed. That's in about 2 to 3 weeks. This is the post-audit work after we received our qualified opinion for fiscal year 11. And so we've asked the auditors, and we've brought in some additional help to go back and look through all the impact fees, all the development agreements. That work is scheduled to be done, and we have received a report that it will likely be done by the end of this month. So as we anticipated and on schedule, so that's good news. And as was reported back to the council probably about a month ago, so far, so good. Again, we're cautiously optimistic. The auditors have not found any material issues, in their research at this point. Now, again, they still have a couple more weeks to go through. They're still forking through the information, but no news right now is good news, and so we're feeling good so far. Now, again, we'll have to wait to see if anything does come up, but again, so far so good. They will then provide a report, hopefully in the January timeframe, to say here's what we either found or did not find, and we'll be able to move forward. So the post-audit work will be done. That means all the audits going all the way back to the year 2000 will be completed. And this is now the beginning of the process of putting our financial past behind us, which is a very important and a very significant step, for the city. Now, also in January, once that post-audit work is done, is when we actually begin the fiscal year 12 audit. We've asked the auditors not to come in until January because we needed to get through this post-audit work. Now, we've received and already have from finance, they've provided some of the pre-audit numbers, and we've talked a little bit about that and how that's going to affect your reserve balance and how we might start this year at about $1.7 million in our reserve. Again, those are pre-audit numbers that we're going to have to.
Paul has a question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want, because sometimes we talk in shorthand,
okay,
Chris, and I just want, for the benefit of the audience, what is post-audit work?
Thank you, Skip.
You
Good
kind of
question.
said it in a way, but I wanted you
Okay,
to
good
clarify.
question. The post-audit work is when we received our fiscal year 11 audit, we received a qualified opinion. In other words, it was qualified because there were certain areas that our auditor said that we needed to review in order for them to feel secure that the financial statements and the numbers as we currently have them, and we anticipate that they are actually correct. So the auditor said, in order for us to know that the numbers that we have here that are currently being reported are accurate, we need you as a city to go back, in some cases back 12 years, to review all of those impact fees, to review all of those development agreements, because those were the two areas that we were qualified on. Specifically with the impact fees, as we collected those impact fees, did we put them in all the right impact fee accounts? As we spent those proceeds, did we spend them appropriately from the right accounts? In other words, we want to make sure that all of those areas were put in their proper place. In other words, all those puzzle pieces were put together appropriately. The other areas in our development agreements, the city has dozens and dozens of development agreements, and we want to make sure that all of those obligations that the city is required to make payments on, and usually it's payments to ourselves, and we found some of those issues with the Dysart impact fee issues, with the Lowe's impact fees issues, et cetera, that the general fund would owe an impact fee fund. We want to make sure that all those obligations are properly recorded. So those were the two areas, and that's what I mean by post-audit work. That post-audit work is going through those two different areas, doing those audits, doing those analyses, and coming back to make sure that, yes, those numbers as we think as we have them actually are the numbers. And again, we're cautiously optimistic because so far, so good. So thank you, Skip. Appreciate that. So we're going to begin the fiscal year 11 audits, or fiscal year 12 audit here in January. We will not receive the final audit results likely until late April, potentially even early May. We are presenting the city manager's recommended budgets before that. In other words, we're moving through our budget process. We're waiting the numbers to see where our reserve fund sits, but that isn't going to hamper us or hinder us from being able to move through our budget process, in the sense that we're also keeping it really as a 2-year process. We're going to hold steady on our expenses. Some expenses are going to go up, some big expenses, and I'll cover some of those here in a second. And we'll, as we go through the whole budget process the next 4 or 5 months, we're going to be detailing all this out. But there's certain expenses that we just know are going to be coming in that we need to anticipate. But that was all part of the plan and part of the 2-year plan. We knew and understood that some expenses were going up. We were planning for that, and so far nothing is unexpected is what we were planning on. So in April, again, the city manager's budget will be presented. April and May 2013, we'll actually get the final 2012 results. So by then, we'll have the post-audit work done, and our goal is to have an unqualified or a clean opinion for our fiscal year 12 audit. That's our goal. And we feel that if we can get through our post-audit work, and we feel that the numbers that we have right now that we'll be presenting over to the auditors for analysis, we feel, and hopefully that we'll get a clean audit, or an unqualified opinion. So that is our goal, and I feel that at this point that it is attainable. Again, we need to wait to see what happens, if there's anything else that the post-audit work finds in between now and the end of the month and when they're finished. So there's, I want to be careful with that, but again, so far so good. Now with that, and what you're going to see is about every 3 to 4 months, you're going to be seeing, hopefully, more news, and hopefully it's going to continue to be the good news. At that point, we'll receive our final fiscal year 12 audit. We will know where we have started then our current fiscal year for fiscal year 13, what our reserve balance is. That's where we'll know. So we'll at least have that. Again, we have our estimates right now, but we'll have that final number.
Right.
In October, about the October timeframe, this is after the fiscal year ends, June 30th. We will then receive the preliminary unaudited results of where we ended up with our current fiscal year 13. Because again, our goal is to know and understand where we're at with our reserve accounts. That's the goal. And it's just going to take some time to get there. So we actually won't know until probably October what the unaudited estimates are for where we ended this fiscal year in our reserve balance until next October. Our goal is then to have our fiscal year 13 audits in on time by December and completed by December of next year, which would then give us the final number of where we ended up with our fiscal year 13 reserve. So that's when I see at that point when we will know for sure where we ended up for fiscal year 13, our current fiscal year, where we ended up with our reserve, and then how that fits in with what the council has relative to its policy goal. So, yeah.
So Chris, so you're looking at when we do the budget, or when the city council here does the budget for 2014,
Yep.
that the budget is going to be based on very thorough audited information to start with.
That we have at the time, some of it will have the fiscal year 12.
I don't mean 14. Excuse me.
Fiscal year 15 is what you're talking about. Yes, so fiscal year 15. So when we begin the fiscal year 15 budget process, a year from now, because right now you're starting the 14 budget process. Thank you. So when you begin the fiscal year 15 budget process, you will have, the final audited, completed numbers for fiscal year 13, and that you will know where you ended up for fiscal year 13 and where you then began from a reserve balance for fiscal year 14. And that is going to be, I believe, the watershed, time, quite honestly. I believe that that's the important moment. Really, until then, we simply don't know. And so because of that, because we won't know, we won't have the unaudited numbers until October, we won't have, the final audited numbers until really next December. What I am going to be proposing in my budget is to maintain the current 2-year process. In other words, continue on the same policy direction that you as a council have established until we know for sure. That is a safe, conservative approach, what we'd be looking at.
I agree with you 100%. That was our direction at the beginning of our fiscal process this year. It was an aggressive policy. I think that aggressive policy has paid off, and I want to remind everybody in the audience who's listening, we are cautiously optimistic, but we are not out of the woods yet. And so we do not wish to do anything that would upset the trajectory that we expect to lead us to a positive result sooner than we had anticipated. But I think it's because we have stayed the course that we're able to reach this conclusion at an earlier time frame. And remember, we said 24 months or less. Mm-hmm. And we are certainly happy that we are at least headed in that direction. But I don't want anyone to suddenly think that we are flush, because we are not.
We're not. And I think Mayor, if I can, it's that or less component that, again, as staff, we are understanding and moving forward with that. Again, any surpluses in revenue fall immediately to that reserve balance. Any savings that we have, and again in the general fund, in expenses, fall to that reserve balance to get to that policy direction sooner than later. So it's an important distinction. As you see these numbers come in, it looks like we're doing well, and we are. But again, it's only going to help us get to our reserve balance that much sooner. With that being said, and again, this is sort of if there's any difference in policy direction, let me know and we can incorporate this. With that being said, because we won't really know for the next year where we sit and where we're going to end up for our current fiscal year, we're going to continue to move forward on a 2-year plan. So we're not anticipating right now any COLA or merit increases for employees. We're going to hold everything steady at this point. We're going to maintain everything that you have currently in the budget relative to economic development and capital projects. There's some limited dollars that you have set aside for capital projects per policy, and how much you set aside for sales tax, et cetera. We're going to continue to maintain that $1 million worth of economic development. In other words, we're holding steady with that 2-year budget process. So if there's any change or any difference in that, please let me know. But that's the approach we're going to take. Some of the larger expense items, that we knew were going to be coming up, but just as a reminder, the increases that you're going to see, for example, the library, there's going to be another $450,000 increase in our taking over the operations of the library. Another example is the Asante Park. That is currently being maintained by the developer. We have ownership, but we take over the maintenance responsibilities in April of 2014, so we're going to have to anticipate the cost associated with taking over the maintenance of that park. And then there's going to be some other base budget increases that we usually have each and every year. Retirements, if ASRS or the public safety retirement systems make any increases, healthcare increases. There might be some increases relative to in the police department, for example, the regional wireless cooperative. These are just automatic increases that we just have to absorb. So it doesn't mean we're holding every expense steady. Our base budget may go up based upon these and other types of issues, but again, this is what we are planning for, and we're still anticipating our revenue increases to continue and capture that savings and again have it fall to the fund balance. This doesn't mean that there aren't going to be some important, and some, good discussion, I believe, on some significant policy issues, that will impact the budget. And I think that this is a good time, to have these policy discussions. We're in a bit of we'll call it a quiet period or a lull as we wait for all this, we continue on our pattern. But I believe there might be some good policy discussions that we're going to be looking for council direction on. One is going to be SLIDs. There's been some discussion on, do we consolidate, do we do away, how do we manage a very cumbersome, complicated SLID process that is I think needing a review, and that's been a request by council to look at that. There's a possible creation, and we'd like to have a discussion with you on the creation of a stormwater utility. A couple weeks back, there was a stormwater expense that came through. Councilmember Alton, I know you requested, is there a funding mechanism for this? There really isn't. There's a way that we're looking at right now to be able to potentially create a funding mechanism that could possibly lower the cost for the vast majority of our residents overall. Being able to create this fund, we'll be providing more information to you, and we're looking forward to that policy discussion. And again, still what we're looking for relative to the outcomes. Again, the strategic plan. We're creating a subcommittee. Well, the mayor will have some more information announced next week on that. this is the perfect opportunity. And what my goal is through the programs and services exercise you're going through the strategic plan, prioritization, this is the perfect time to create. And what I am going to be hoping to create with you is a 5-year expense plan. So you will have created your expenses. So as you have, maybe more reserves, than your 13 million, policy, as you have potential capacity, of revenues, once we get through this process, your expenses will still be here. Your revenues could be up here. You could potentially have, a significant amount of capacity. The idea is to plan now, and for the next 5 years, on how you want to program that capacity over the next 5 years. That doesn't mean it won't change, but at least you come up with a base plan. And that's why we're going to be going through these exercises. So again, this is the perfect time to do that and to create those outcomes. Yeah.
Councilmember Alton, or excuse me, Councilmember Hall first.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Can we go back to SLIDs?
You bet. Now, we don't have a lot of information, so maybe I opened up the Pandora's box on that one. But
could you explain what is a SLID?
You bet. Yeah. These are the street lighting improvement districts, and right now, I can't remember, Lindsay, how many do we have? Like 90 some odd. What we have for the the audience watching at home with popcorn, what we have is all the street lights you see in the city are managed by districts, and the city is divided up into 90 some odd lighting districts, that have different rates, that have different assessment ratios, and how those costs are come up that our residents are billed on through their property tax bill, basically. And we're looking at figuring out a way to try and simplify that process and potentially even out that process. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, honestly, it's not going to be something that we're going to be able to do overnight. It's probably going to take, potentially even a couple years to get through the process, but that's okay. But come up with a plan. And there might be some policy directions and discussions, but coming up with that plan on how to simplify those SLIDs.
I think that's been the general consensus of the council for a long time, that we are looking for simplicity and generally common sense way of approaching our street lighting improvement districts. It's been an ongoing issue that's been raised by every one of our districts, members of every one of our districts, particularly those who've had to go out and pound the doors for creating street light improvement districts after the fact. So believe me, we will welcome a strategic plan for how we manage that.
It won't be a simple process, quite honestly. It's a very, very complicated process, but it'll take some time to get through.
Yeah. And also, just real quick.
Okay.
Also, the stormwater utility fund. Right now, the drainage projects are funded out of the
general fund.
Out of the general fund.
Yes. Yeah, so all of your stormwater management costs are funded out of the general fund. And are paid for through the general tax revenues of the city.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alton.
Thank you. My number one priority would be going into the next year and looking at all the budgets, is that if we have the capacity to reinstate raises for our city employees, that is my number one priority. And I think it is as well as for some others on the council.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily directors, not necessarily appointees, sorry. But we have, 4 years without a raise?
This is our 5th year currently
without a raise. And my heart goes out to them. And hopefully, and I think they have understood as to why we have done this in order to get out of the financial hole that we were in. But I think that it behooves us to make that a priority. And the priority would be is to retain employees rather than train new employees, because it costs more. And and the fire and the police, without a STEP program, these people have entered the workforce 4 or 5 years ago and have not received any increase. But they're doing the same job as people that were there 20 years.
And our population has increased.
And our population has increased as well. So, and I hope, Chris, that you will take that into consideration whenever we get excess revenues, even before the 15. I'd like to see it applied maybe to 13, 14 And I know we don't want to go in the hole, and I know we don't want to dip into a basket that has not yet been proven, but without great employees, this city would not be the city that it is right now.
I completely agree, and that would be a policy discussion and decision by the council. And you would have that, excuse me, that policy discussion within the context of how do you want that to affect your reserve goal. And so maybe as we move forward and we get some of the news, modifications of that policy. I mean, that would be, again, that's a policy direction from council, but and I'd be happy to have that. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
and Mayor, that was it. That was my presentation.
Are you
Yep, that was
complete?
it.
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. I appreciate that. Are there any further questions from the members of the council? None. We have one member of the public who I wish to speak to the call to the public. Mr. Miller, are you still here? Yeah, there you are. Randy, you want to come forward?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Wolcott and council members. I wanted to give you an update on the health fair, and you were all generous enough to be very supportive of it, and I want to be respectful and let you know how we did. I thought the health fair and my team thought the health fair went off really well. We had a lot of support from not just the community, but also from city members. We had a council member, Skip Hall, was part of the process, very supportive, a big help. Every agency that we had contact with that we needed assistance from was very responsive. I'm happy to hear that. Wasn't surprised, but it was pleasant. It was very nice to see that they were all aware. There were meetings going on within the different departments that the event was going on, and to be supportive, and everyone provided 110% to make sure that it went off well. So I think that I thank you guys for that, and the city's staff that did such a good job. Surprise Police Department and Surprise Fire Department participated. They were very responsive, very supportive in providing what we needed. They had the fire department made sure we had the medevac helicopters out there. We had the Disabilities Commission that came to the plate to help with, there's a lot of things that had to happen to make this thing work, from traffic control to planning the inside as well as the outside. And the Disabilities Commission came on board, and they offered to provide traffic control point for us for the parking lot for the helicopter, and it was VIP parking as well as handicap parking. We expanded handicap parking, and one of the things that was brought to my attention from the commission was it kind of highlighted a problem that probably is citywide. There's a lot of, or there's a pattern, and we've all seen it, where we have people with handicap placards on their cars, and they're taking advantage of the few spaces that are there. And with the men and women returning back from service with disabilities and stuff, it kind of highlighted an issue that the disabilities, whoops, I hope that wasn't because I'm here.
Hopefully it's all fine. It's fine. It's fine.
It highlighted an issue that maybe the Disabilities Commission, they expressed a desire to bring forward, and I agree, it was a problem. The turnout for the health fair was pretty good. We actually had about 1,100 people go through there.
Good.
We made a decision late in the game. We had some discussions about providing 100 free lab tests for people that came in. The lab tests can be pretty expensive. Prevention and early detection was kind of the focus of it, of the health fair, and we wanted to make sure we touched on that. So we were able to give 100 free health screenings. We gave all 100 of those. The nice thing about it is nobody really knew they were going to be free. So these people that came were going to pay for that anyway because they knew it was at a low cost. And when they got it for free, it was nice. It was $750 that we donated through our portion, and ColMed Labs, who has been eager to participate with us next year and any number of years coming up, they donated the other $750. So it was a $1,500 cost for that, for 100 lab tests, and that was paid for, and the community got a benefit from that. We also had noticed that the facilities are excellent. The community university is a beautiful facility. The city hall is a beautiful facility. But that highlighted an issue we have within the city as well. If we would have had any more than that 1,100 people, we would have been probably in trouble.
It's not large enough to accommodate large venues, and maybe some, I know I'm speaking to the choir, we could use some facility where we could hold larger events like this and accommodate it. But with some restructuring how we utilize the community and utilize it more effectively and efficiently, we should be fine for a couple of years to have it there. The cost for the facility was $3,300. If we had our own facility, you could rent that out. But it went well. I was happy to participate and be a member of the team for that. Sun Health and Banner Del Webb Hospital participated and provided a lot of good support. It was just a very nice function. I was glad to see Mr. Woodard there and participated. He had good remarks for it. The inside was very nice. We had a lot of medical providers that came and set up inside the large community room, which it was I think the first event I've seen where it was so professionally done by the people that participated. I didn't do that. They did that. Our team didn't do that, but it was set up by Bhakti Gaselia from Sun Health, and she's did a wonderful job on that. We are going to be giving a donation to Sun Health and returning whatever money to the other, our other community. Benavia paid $500 to get in. We're going to give that back to them, and I'm hoping to give them an additional $500 back to help them. The idea was to be supportive of local communities, organizations that do so much in the community, and also bring the community together and highlight some of the things that we have to offer that are here locally. It's a learning experience. We will take from this and make next year's better, and so on and so forth. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Randy, for the work that you did in pulling this all together and working with the council to make this a success, working with our city staff to make it a success. This is truly a community partnership to have something like this with such a great success on our first time out. Obviously, we want to be a healthy community, and so anything that we can do to set the stage for people to take interest in their health and take a proactive stance towards good health is a positive for our community as a whole. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did Councilman Hall, did you have something that you wanted to add?
No, I just, the chamber helped you too, huh, Randy?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Can't miss the chamber, right? We can't miss you.
But yes, thank you. Yeah, the chamber was very supportive. There are so many organizations. We want to recognize them all. And that's what brings a community together.
Thank you again. Appreciate your report, too. Thanks so much. That being the last, is there another member who has signed up to speak this evening?
He didn't sign, but he's asked to speak.
Okay. Evening.
Roland.
Good to see you, Roland.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. I just want to touch on a point that Randy was just talking about, and that's the abuse of the handicap placards in the city of Surprise. Do I know what the answer is? No, I don't. But somebody borrows grandma's placard to run down to the store, or somebody even takes a placard out of somebody's car and uses it. I don't know what the Surprise Police Department can do about that, but I'd be open to any kind of suggestions. What's really blatant is when somebody goes into a handicapped spot without a placard, jumps out of their four-wheel drive, and runs in and says, when I challenge them, I'm only going to be a minute. Well, it's never just a minute. And besides that, there's somebody coming in the parking lot that's handicapped that needs that spot. That's not available. So we were very glad to assist with the Health Fair Disability Advisory Commission. We had people out there helping parking, stuff like that. So it was very, very nice, and I hope we helped them a little bit. On a different subject, the Disability Advisory Commission is going to be televised December 17th and I really thank the City Council and staff for arranging that. And our program, Above and Beyond, is doing great guns. We're going to award the first certificate that evening when it's televised to Mr. Steve Miller, who is the branch manager of Chase Bank. on the corner of Bell Road and Cotton Lane. They were the first ones to install an automatic opening door. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roland.
Thanks, Roland.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
No, Mayor.
All right. Thank you so much. I do have announcement just to remind everyone that tomorrow evening there is a boards and commissions handbook training that has been set up for all of our boards and commissions. I believe that will be conducted by you, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Hillman.
The
Tag team.
city manager, city attorney, and the city clerk will all be there in attendance presenting.
Perfect. And
6 o'clock.
at 6 o'clock here.
Right here.
Right here in this room. And so, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Second.
Registration is now open for a variety of winter youth sports and camps for boys and girls ages 4 to 15. Boys and girls ages 5 to 15 will have the fun